Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, welcome to Sela Social Studies. Okay, so today we're going to cover the second president of the Great Depression. And this is actually the president that is elected during the Great Depression and lasts all the way until the end of the Great Depression, which is through World War II. In 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, winds up beating Herbert Hoover in the election. Roosevelt really started to push was what he called his new program, right? The New Deal. That was the name of his program, the New Deal. Roosevelt felt that Americans were getting a raw deal or a poor deal with the way Hoover was dealing with the Great Depression, saying that it'll be over soon, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, you should be relying on churches and private individuals. Roosevelt said, no, it's time for a new deal. So during this New Deal, he has something which he actually winds up coining the first 100 days. He coins this through one of his radio styled fireside chats. And basically what the first 100 days, and we actually still judge a president today by his first 100 days, Roosevelt was saying, here, this is what I'm going to do during my first 100 days. So what are some of the things that Roosevelt winds up doing in his first 100 days? Well, actually, he does a lot. He creates a lot of programs in the first 100 days, and we're going to review a couple of them. One of the ones that we're going to review is the Emergency Banking Relief Act from March 6th through March 10th, 1933. Roosevelt actually shuts down the banks. We call it a bank holiday. He shuts down all the banks and sends a group of people into these banks to go over their books, see who's running a proper bank and who's not. And ultimately what would happen here is Roosevelt would go ahead and open up the new banks, which he felt were solvent, banks that would be able to actually loan money, banks that were going to be able to stay open. Some of the other ones that we're going to cover in class is during the first 100 days, the Civilian Conservation Corps is created. The Agricultural Adjustment Act is created. So Roosevelt is really trying to push his New Deal plan, his New Deal program. And in Roosevelt's New Deal program, he really pushes for like what he calls the 3 R's, the 3 R's of the New Deal. What are the 3 R's of the New Deal? He is going to provide relief for American families. He is going to reform the nation and he is going to recover the economy. So relief, reform, and recovery. That's what Roosevelt is really pushing in his ideals of the new plan. And like I said prior to, he actually tells the nation this in one of those radio fireside chats. He has over 100 of them where families literally gather around the radio just to hear Roosevelt speak and feel the reaffirming of Roosevelt telling the nation these things is really what's going to get them inside. Like, wow, yeah, we're going to be able to get through this. So what other type of programs does Roosevelt actually create? Because it's Roosevelt's creation of these programs that he feels is going to start to help us get out of the Great Depression. So what are some of these programs? Well, he creates, like I said, within his first 100 days, the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And what the Civilian Conservation Corps is it actually takes a lot of young men and puts them to work in the public sector. They're going to be building state parks, and they're going to be building bridges and stuff along those lines, public work lines, in order to put men back to work. He also creates the Agricultural Adjustment Act. What Roosevelt starts doing is he starts paying farmers not to grow certain crops. Now, how does that make sense? Well, that makes sense because when you start not growing crops, your supply lowers and your demand goes up. And when you have a lower supply and a higher demand, you go ahead and make more money off of the stuff that you are growing. So those two right there within the first 100 days are good ideas to put people back to work. Now, on your note sheet, I wanted you to know the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, because that is a big one. Roosevelt puts about 9 to 10 million people back to work, building things like roads and bridges in the public works sector. So he is now putting millions of people back to work. Remember, during the Great Depression, that the unemployment was high. Okay, it was very high, 25 up to 25, 30% now. But these are the type of things that Roosevelt knows has to change. In order for our economy to do better, we have to put people back to work. Because if you're back to work, you have money that you can spend. If you're not working, you can't spend money. Businesses go out of business. Okay, so you have the CCC, the AAA, the WPA, the Tennessee Valley Authority telling people, putting people to work, building bridges on Tennessee River to put power supply stations up, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Because after the stock market crashed, a lot of banks had to close because people were taking out all their funds. There was no insurance on that money. So Roosevelt creates the FDIC to put insurance on that money. So if a bank were to somehow go under again, you would be insured. You would be able to get your money. It originally started at about $5,000, then it went up to about $100,000, and today in 2020, it's about $200,000. Final program I wanted you to know on your note sheet is the Social Security Administration. This one is still around today, but this was Roosevelt's attempt to make sure that the older generations of America would still have money to spend as they get older. As they have to retire, they are still able to get money. So some people felt that this was what we call a Keynesian theory. The Keynesian theory is the idea that government was able to directly influence the demand for goods and services through tax policies and public expenditures. That's what the Keynesian theory is, the idea that the government controlled goods, services, and the demand for them through cutting taxes, through raising taxes, through putting people to work. And a lot of Americans agreed, and some did not agree with this. The Supreme Court was actually infamous for overturning many of the New Deal initiatives. So Roosevelt had a plan how to deal with the Supreme Court. What Roosevelt said was to these Supreme Court justices, now remember, these justices are able to stay there for life. But Roosevelt said, hey, once you turn 70, I will be able to add a justice on there that's going to kind of replace you in a way, kind of replace your book. You're going to stay there when you're 70. I'm going to pack that Supreme Court with younger justices who want to do what I want to do. So that gets overturned. That's not supported. However, the Supreme Court now knows that Roosevelt is not messing around with this New Deal program. So even though the New Deal was doing things that it was helping America. It wasn't getting us out of the Great Depression. That was World War II. But it was helping. It was putting millions of people back to work. It was helping the farmers. It was helping the elderly. So it was helping. But you did have critics of the New Deal program. Of course, it's politics. We're going to have critics. Left-wing critics like Huey Long believed that it just wasn't good enough. Right? There's more things we can do. While on the other side of the aisle, there were right-wing critics who felt that this was just socialism in disguise. So Roosevelt is president, like I said, through the whole Great Depression. And this is not just an American Great Depression. This is a world Great Depression. And he's doing his best to try to put the nation back together, trying to help build the economy, try to put people back to work. And like I said, it is not until World War II and the factories going into mass production of war supplies that we actually get out of the Great Depression. But Roosevelt is trying his hardest to do it.